This will be an introduction to the onMouseOverlay library token. I created this library token to provide similar effects that you see in other VTT applications where when you mouse over or select a token, in this case an overlay will appear with 9 programmable tiles. The library token provides up to 6 different overlays. So in this example, I have a PC token and I'm hovering over self. But now if I hover over an NPC token, I have a selection indicator as well as a new overlay. And if I mouse over a friendly token or PC token, it's a new overlay, again with the selection indicator. And there's a combination of up to 6 different overlays that can be used like this. All right, the library token includes 3 profiles. There is a sci-fi profile, a modern warfare profile, and a medieval times profile. And as I mentioned, there's kind of a self overlay, a PC overlay, and then an NPC overlay. In order for any of this functionality to work, you do have to make some changes to your campaign. To do that, you can select the library token, run this info macro, and I've included this piece here, which you can highlight and copy, which I'll do now. You can edit your campaign properties, and you want to select the property that your PC and NPC tokens are generally tied to, and add this in. I already have it here, but I'm going to go ahead and overwrite it, and then hit update, OK, and at that point the functionality should exist. There are some other things you'll want to read through here, so I would advise opening the info macro and taking a look. OK, so to get in the configuration options, you can run those configuration macros from here, or you can drag it to your GM panel. Open that now. The first section here is the active profile. As I mentioned, there are 3 profiles that are built in. The profile active right now is the medieval times. To change that, I can choose this drop-down, choose a new profile, and then hit select. At that point, if I come back to the map, you'll see now the profiles are, or overlays, I should say, are different. Change this back to medieval times. You can delete profiles that you have added by selecting your profile, checking this box, and hitting delete. If you delete a profile, all of the overlays within that profile are deleted. You can also create a series of custom profiles, for example, a cleric profile or a fighter profile, and then you can save those profiles to your specific token such that those tokens will bring up that saved profile instead of the active default profile. Any profile you create will automatically create 3 overlays. There are 3 required overlays, self, PC, and NPC. So just know that anytime you have a profile, there will always be those 3 overlays. You can edit an overlay by selecting it through this drop-down and then hitting edit. I'll get into this section more later. You can also delete any overlay that you've added if you select it in the drop-down, check this box, and then hit delete. You can customize the size of a profile, of an overlay, such that you can have a maximum or minimum size, and I'll demonstrate more on those settings later. Here you can create an entirely new profile, as I mentioned before, a cleric profile or a fighter profile. If I hit new, it will take the image I have selected and use that as the default image of the overlay. You can create custom overlays by using external tools and saving those images and then selecting those to create your custom overlay. If you want to add an overlay to an existing profile, make sure this profile name is blank, select in your drop-down the overlay you want to add, select the image that you want that overlay to be, and then click New. If you want to use an existing overlay, make sure nothing is selected, and it will use the overlay chosen in this list. As mentioned, you have 3 additional overlays that can be used. There's a friend, foe, and other. And here is the macro or eval macro code in this case I'm using in order to determine if it's a friend, foe, or other. These other settings here, this essentially disables the library token. So if I were to check this and hit save, it will disable all those features. During the loading of a new campaign or when a player joins the campaign, it does output messages to chat, and this will disable those. In the example I gave, I showed how there is a must fully see target token, and that is to mean that if I select a token and then mouse over this token, I can't fully see it, so the overlay won't appear. But in this case, I can see it, so the overlay appears. This toggle overlay on click, if I have this checked and then saved, when I mouse over a token and then click the token, the overlay will appear and disappear. Any changes I make with these sections, it's important that I hit save. Okay, let's go into some of the advanced features. To further customize an overlay, you can select the overlay in this drop-down and then click Edit. You're provided a checkbox and button for every tile. The checkbox is to show where a pass-through exists or where no tile exists to be clicked on. So you'll notice in this case, I'm using this set of 3 tiles and this set of 3 tiles. You can use all 9 tiles if you like. In this case, it's just the 6 that aren't checked. You can edit each tile by clicking the respective button. And in this case, you can change the label that's on the tile, as well as add any macro or eval macro compliant code. Any changes you make here, you'll need to save or you'll lose the work. You can also change the default size of the overlay. You'll notice in some cases the overlay extends beyond the bounds of the token. That is for this setting. So as an example, if I check this and then click save, you'll notice now it will stay within the bounds of the token. You can also use either built-in macros or you can customize your macros to your liking. And I'll show that later. Change this back. Okay. To add a new overlay to an existing profile, make sure this field is blank, select the overlay you want to add, and then make sure either no token is selected or the token you want used as the overlay is selected, and then click New. In this case, I want to use the same overlay for self. This is to confirm that this is a new medieval times friend overlay, and then you also have that option to extend the overlay beyond the bounds of the token. Save. Now I can edit that new overlay by selecting it in the drop-down and then clicking Edit. If I want to add a new overlay with a custom image or a new image, again, make sure this field is blank. Select the type of overlay I want to create. Select the image I want used, and then click New. At this point, again, it's to confirm the profile name and if you want to extend the profile beyond the bounds. And click Save. And now I can edit that profile by clicking here and then clicking Edit. So go ahead and go back. Let's create a couple of new profiles. I'll create a Cleric and Fighter profile. So first, let's create a Cleric profile with a set of custom images. I want to use this image as my background or overlay, and we'll click New. This looks correct, so we'll click Save. Now I have the active profile, which will default to the last one I created, and then the set of 3 overlays, as I mentioned, will be automatically created. I want to make an adjustment to the self, so let's edit that. You'll notice on default, it will assume the middle section is a pass-through. For you, you may want to change that. Let's go ahead and make some edits. Click the tile and say this is the backpack. Click Save. Torch. Long rest. Spellbook. Meditate. Food and drink. Okay, that looks good. Go back. And at this point, I can select my Cleric and then save custom profile. And then I'm going to change my default active profile to medieval times and select. And now if I have no token selected or a token selected without the custom profile, you'll see it's the default medieval times overlays. However, if I select the Cleric token and then mouse over, you'll notice it is the custom overlay that I created for the Cleric. So that's how you can essentially make changes or customize overlays per profile. Let's create that fighter profile. And I want to use this. Say new. That looks correct. And I want to edit this. And this is an example to show that even though there are 2 tiles here, you can essentially click this and say shield. And you can also call this shield. And I can call this weapon build 1. I want this tile to be active. Weapon build 2. Potion. One-handed swing. One-handed swing. And then go back. And now if I have this token selected, you'll see it's now that custom overlay, and I want to make another change. I want to oversize that. So now when I go over, you'll see that it's different. And this is where, even though it's technically two tiles here, you can program it as if it is one. So this is just an example of how you can customize the different overlays and profiles. There are 3 different ways to run macros behind the tiles on the overlays. If you select the overlay you want to edit, and then you can select the tile that you want to edit, you can enter a macro directly here. I've created a macro on this library token called demo test, and that's the macro I'm going to run in this example. then I'll click Save. And once that's done, I can actually click the token and then the tile, and you'll see it's running this demo test macro. I can also remove this, so leave it blank. I'll hit Save. This box is checked, and now if I click the token and bring up the overlay, you'll see it's running a different macro, and I'll explain where that's coming from in just 1 minute. If I uncheck this and then hit Save, it's running a different macro called MO tiles. And no matter what tile I click, it will run that macro. If I explain where those macros were coming from, here is the MO tiles macro, and to edit that to explain further, it's being passed 3 different variables: the token ID that's selected, the mouse over ID, and then the tile macro that's being passed. The self tile macros come from the 6 different overlay options you can create. I can open this group up, and the self tile is this macro. So again, if I use the built-in macros and click Save, then bring the overlay up, you'll see that this is where each of those macros come from. The maximum and minimum size settings allow for additional features when it comes to how the overlays are drawn. This is a 100 by 100 pixel grid, and the overlay is drawn through the size of the grid and the size of the token. If I increase the size of the token, change this to gargantuan, it does impact the size of the overlay. And sometimes this just looks unruly. Now you can actually change that by hard coding the maximum size. So again, this is a 100 by 100 pixel grid. I'll save the size at 100, and now when I mouse over, it will essentially enforce this size. Now this also shows a different kind of feature when using the minimum size. So set this back to 0, and I can set this, for example, at a minimum size of 25, and hit Save. And now the overlay will be 25 pixels in size. This can allow, if I were to now select this token and zoom in, it could allow for all 9 tiles to be configured for macros and still leave a large space for you to select your token. Setting this back at 0. One other option is you can set the maximum size to -1, and that setting allows the overlay to consume the entire viewport, and it will attempt to draw at the 0, 0 location. So in this example, you'll see I can select the token, and when I mouse over, I get the same overlay, the same indicator, and the same kind of tiles, but it will work to consume the entire viewport and size. So that's the examples of how you can use the maximum and minimum size settings. This is just an example of how the overlays will look on a variety of different grid types. Within the download folder, I include an XCF file, and that file can be opened by this GIMP application. This is the application I use to create or modify any of the overlays. So really this is just an image application that allows you to select different images in this case, and then I can save those images as a web or PNG type file, and it just includes a handy kind of pre-made grid. In this case, I think this is 300 by 300, but you can really make it any size you want and save any image that you want and use that as an overlay. But this is just something that I include to either create your own or additionally customize your overlays.